Every story leaves something behind. A whisper, a shadow, a question that was never answered. Here, we dig through the forgotten files, the unsolved mysteries, the chilling true crimes, and the horrors people wish had stayed buried. From haunted legends to real-life nightmares, every tale is pulled straight from the horror archives. So turn down the lights, put on your headphones, and step carefully, because once a story enters the horror archives, it never truly leaves. This video is about couchsurfing, staying in a stranger's home in a foreign city, sleeping on their couch, trusting that the person on the other side of that profile is exactly who they say they are. These 5 stories were sent in by viewers who found out the hard way that sometimes they are not. The first story is called The Towel That Was Already Damp. This one comes from a listener who was traveling through Portugal. It starts with something small, something you'd normally brush off. But by the second night, it becomes clear that something else is living in that apartment. The towel he left out for me was damp, not like it had just been washed. It was warm, and it smelled faintly like skin. I was couchsurfing through Portugal in the summer of 2019. I'd been doing it for years without a single bad experience. My host in Lisbon was a guy named Tomas, mid-40s, great reviews, over 60 of them. His apartment was on the 4th floor of a crumbling old building in Alfama, up a narrow staircase that tilted slightly to the left, the kind of building where the walls sweat in the heat and every footstep echoes through the tile. Tomas was friendly in a quiet way. He showed me the couch, gave me a key, pointed out the bathroom. That's when I noticed the towel folded neatly on the edge of the tub. I picked it up and it was warm and damp. I figured maybe he just showered, so I didn't think much of it. The first night was fine. I slept okay. In the morning, I went out to explore the city. When I came back around 6, Tomas was sitting at the kitchen table with tea. We talked a bit, normal stuff, travel stories. He mentioned he used to have a roommate, but that it didn't work out. He said it casually, but he looked at the hallway when he said it. That night, I woke up around 3 in the morning, not because of a sound, because of a feeling, that heavy feeling you get when someone is watching you. The apartment was completely dark, except for a thin stripe of light coming from under the bathroom door. I assumed Tomas was up. I rolled over and tried to go back to sleep, but the light didn't go off. I lay there for maybe 20 minutes and it stayed on. No sounds, no water running, no toilet flushing, just the light. Eventually, I got up to use the kitchen sink for water. When I passed the bathroom door, I stopped. The light was on, but the door was slightly open. I pushed it gently and it swung inward. The bathroom was empty, but the towel was on the floor this time, crumpled up, and it was damp again. Warm. I went back to the couch feeling uneasy. In the morning, I mentioned it to Tomas. I said something like, "Hey, I think you left the bathroom light on." He looked at me and said he'd slept through the night. He hadn't gotten up. I told myself it was nothing. Old building, maybe a water leak warming the pipes. Maybe I was half asleep and imagining things. But the second night was worse. I woke up at almost the exact same time. The bathroom light was on again. This time the door was fully open, and sitting on the edge of the tub was a pair of slippers I hadn't seen before. Women's slippers, small pale pink, worn down at the heels. I didn't touch them. I went back to the couch and sat up until morning. When Tomas came out, I asked him directly. I said, "Whose slippers are those in the bathroom?" He went in and looked and came back out and said there were no slippers. I went to check. He was right. They were gone. I left that afternoon. I made up some excuse about catching an earlier bus to Porto. Tomas didn't seem surprised. He just nodded and said okay. A few months later, I looked at his profile again. He had a new review from a woman. She gave him 5 stars, but in the text, she wrote something strange. She said the apartment was lovely, but she kept finding her things moved around in the night. She said she woke up once, and her shoes were in the bathroom, and she didn't remember putting them there. The review after that was from a man. 3 stars. All it said was, "I don't think Tomas lives alone." I've thought about it a lot since then. About the towel, the slippers, the roommate that didn't work out. I don't know what was in that apartment with us. I just know that every time I woke up, it had just finished using the bathroom. That feeling of something unseen sharing your space. It's one of those fears that's hard to explain to someone who hasn't felt it. The next story goes in a different direction. This one isn't about something hiding. It's about something displayed. This one is called The Photos on the Mantle. A listener sent this in about a stay at a farmhouse in rural France. The host had a tradition of photographing every guest. It seemed charming until he noticed where his photo kept moving. There were photos on the mantle of every person who had ever stayed in that house. Dozens of them, Polaroids pinned to a corkboard above the fireplace like a collection. I was traveling through rural France in the fall of 2021, and I'd booked a couchsurfing stay at a farmhouse outside a village called Saint-Macaire. My host was an older woman named Celeste. She had around 20 reviews, all positive. People described her as grandmotherly, warm, a wonderful cook. The farmhouse was at the end of a dirt road, surrounded by sunflower fields that had already gone brown for the season. The house itself was beautiful in a heavy, stone-walled way, the kind of place that holds cold. Celeste greeted me at the door with tea and biscuits. She was exactly how the reviews described. Soft-spoken, kind, almost too welcoming. She showed me upstairs to a small guest room with a single bed and a window that looked out over the dead fields. On my way up, I passed the living room and noticed the corkboard. It was covered in Polaroid photos. Every one of them showed a person standing in front of the fireplace, smiling. Some looked recent, some were yellowed. I asked her about it. She said it was her tradition. Every guest gets a photo. She said she liked to remember everyone who passed through. I thought it was charming. She took mine before dinner. I stood in front of the fireplace and she held up the old camera, and the flash went off, and she pinned it to the board while the image was still developing. Dinner was good. Soup, bread, cheese. We talked about the village, about her late husband, about the land. She mentioned that the house had been in her family for over 100 years. She said she'd been hosting travelers for almost 15. That seemed like a lot of Polaroids, but the board was big. That night I slept well, but in the morning, when I came downstairs, something was different about the board. It took me a moment to notice. My photo had been moved. The night before, Celeste had pinned it at the bottom right corner. Now it was in the center row, and the photo that had been in that spot was gone. I didn't mention it. I thought maybe she rearranged them. I went into the village that day. I stopped at a small cafe and ended up talking to the owner. When I mentioned I was staying at Celeste's farmhouse, his face changed. Not dramatically, just a small tightening around the eyes. He said she was a nice woman. Then he said something I didn't understand at first. He said just, "Don't let her move your photo to the top row." I laughed. I asked what he meant. He didn't laugh back. He said a few years ago, a young man from Germany stayed with her. His photo ended up on the top row, and then he stopped coming into the village. People assumed he left, but his car stayed parked at the end of a road for 3 weeks before anyone thought to check. He said the man was fine. He'd apparently left on foot and hitchhiked, but the cafe owner didn't believe it. He said the man's bag was still in the guest room when the police came. Celeste said he must have forgotten it. I went back to the farmhouse that afternoon. I looked at the board immediately. My photo had moved again. It was now in the second to top row. I counted the photos above me. There were only 4. I looked at the top row more carefully. There were 6 photos up there. The people in them weren't smiling like the others. Their expressions were flatter, more like they didn't know the photo was being taken. And one of them, a young man with blonde hair, had his eyes closed. I packed my bag while Celeste was in the garden. I left through the front door without saying goodbye. I walked the dirt road to the village, and I didn't look back. When I got home weeks later, I checked her profile. It was still active, still had good reviews, but I noticed something I hadn't before. 3 of her past guests had deleted their accounts, and one of them, a user named Marcus from Hamburg, had a single reference left on his page from someone else. It read, "If anyone knows where Marcus is, please contact his family." I never reported Celeste. I didn't have proof of anything, but I think about that top row. I think about the photos with the flat expressions, and I think about the fact that when I left, my Polaroid was still pinned to her board, and I have no way of knowing what row it's on now. Sometimes the warning signs aren't hidden. They are right there on the wall, and you don't see them until it's almost too late. This next story takes things into stranger territory. This one is called The Guest Book with my name already in it. A listener sent this from a trip to Krakow. When he arrived at his host's apartment, his name was already in the guest book, in his own handwriting, dated 2 weeks earlier. My name was already in the guest book when I arrived, written in handwriting that looked exactly like mine. This happened in 2020, right before the world shut down. I was couchsurfing through Eastern Europe and had arranged a stay in Krakow with a host named Damien. He lived in a converted loft above an old print shop in Kazimierz. The neighborhood was beautiful, cobblestone streets and low light from old lamps, but the building itself felt wrong. The stairwell was too narrow. The walls were painted a dark brownish red that might have once been brighter. The whole place smelled like ink and something underneath it, something organic. Damien was younger than I expected, maybe mid-20s, very polite but almost rehearsed, like he'd memorized what to say. He showed me the loft. It was one big open room with high ceilings and exposed beams. My sleeping area was separated from his by a curtain. On the table near the door was a leather-bound guest book. He told me to sign it before I settled in. I opened it and flipped to the last page with writing, and there, 3 entries from the bottom, was my name, my full name, first and last. The date next to it was 2 weeks earlier. The handwriting was close enough to mine that my stomach dropped. I showed it to Damien. He looked at it and said that was strange. He said maybe someone with the same name had stayed before me. I told him it was an unusual name. I told him the handwriting looked like mine. He just kind of shrugged and said he gets a lot of guests. I should have left. I know that now. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay behind the curtain, listening to Damien breathe on the other side. At some point, I heard him get up. I heard his feet on the wooden floor, soft and slow, moving toward the table. I heard the guest book open, pages turning, and then nothing. Silence for maybe 5 minutes. Then his feet moving back and his bed creaking. In the morning, I checked the book. A new entry had been added below mine. Same name, same handwriting, but this time the date was tomorrow's date. I confronted Damien over coffee. I wasn't aggressive about it, but I was direct. I said someone is writing my name in your guest book and dating it for tomorrow. He looked at me with absolutely no change in expression. He said maybe you should stay another night to see. That sentence made my skin crawl. Not the words, the tone, like he was quoting something, like it was a line he'd said before. I told him I was going out. I took my bag with me. I didn't come back. I went to a hostel instead and spent 3 days in Krakow without incident. But on my last day, I did something I probably shouldn't have. I went back to the building, not inside. I just stood across the street and looked up at the loft windows. The lights were on. I could see movement behind the curtain. 2 shapes. One was Damien. The other was someone about my height, my build, pacing slowly back and forth. I took a photo with my phone. When I looked at it later, the second figure wasn't visible, just Damien standing alone by the table, the guest book open in front of him. I deleted my Couchsurfing account the next week, but about a month later, I got an email. It was a review notification. Someone had left me a review. It was from Damien. It said, "Great guest, stayed 2 nights, hope to host again." I had only stayed 1 night. The thing that bothers me most isn't the guest book or the figure in the window. It's that I checked the review closely. It was timestamped for the day after I left, the day that had been written next to my name, and the profile photo attached to the review. My profile photo had been changed. It still showed my face, but the background was different. It was the inside of that loft, a photo taken from behind the curtain. I did not take that photo. I have never seen that image before, but it's me. There is no question. It's me. I don't know what to make of that one. Identity is something we take for granted until someone else starts wearing it. Story number 4 is called The Basement Room He Didn't List. This one was sent in by a listener who stayed in Berlin. The listing said 1st floor apartment, but when his host led him inside, they went down, and behind one of the doors, something was scratching to get out. The listing said first floor apartment, but when he led me inside, we went down. I was in Berlin, November 2018. I was between job and stretching my savings through Europe on Couchsurfing and cheap hostels. My host was a man named Victor. His profile was sparse, only 3 reviews, but all positive. Short things like clean space, friendly host. His profile picture was just a black square. I figured he was private. Some people are. Victor met me at a U-Bahn station in Newcastle. He was tall, gaunt, maybe 50. He carried himself like someone who was used to being alone. We walked about 10 minutes to a residential block, the kind of gray post-war building that Berlin is full of. He led me through the front entrance and past the mailboxes. I expected him to go up the stairs. Instead, he opened a door to the right, and we went down a half flight of steps to a basement-level unit. It was legal, technically. It had a window, though it was at ground level and looked out at a wall of dirt and concrete about 2 feet away. The ceiling was low. The air was cool and thick with the smell of damp concrete and something chemical I couldn't place. Cleaning solution, maybe. Too much of it. The couch I was supposed to sleep on was in the main room. It was covered in a plastic sheet. Victor said he just cleaned it. Beyond the main room, there was a short hallway with 2 doors. One was the bathroom. The other was closed. Victor saw me look at it and said that's storage. Off limits. He said it firmly but politely. I said okay. The first night I barely slept. The room was too quiet. That deep underground quiet where you can hear your own blood moving. Around 2 in the morning, I heard something from behind the closed door. A rhythmic sound, soft, steady, like someone tapping a finger on wood. It went on for about 10 minutes and then stopped. I told myself it was pipes. Old building, basement unit, pipes make noise. I almost believed it. The next day, Victor went to work. He told me to make myself at home, but reminded me about the storage room. Don't go in there, he said again. This time he didn't say it politely. He said it flat, the way you'd say don't touch the stove to a child. I spent the day out. When I came back in the evening, something was different. The chemical smell was stronger, and there was a new lock on the storage room door. It hadn't been there that morning. A padlock, heavy duty, with a key. I should tell you that I'm not the kind of person who snoops. I respect people's space, but something about that lock made my chest tight. You don't add a lock to a room while your guest is out, unless you're worried about what they might find. That night, the tapping came back, but it wasn't tapping. With the apartment completely silent and my ear unconsciously straining, I could tell. It was scratching, slow, rhythmic scratching, like a fingernail drawn down wood in a steady pattern. 5 scratches, pause, 5 scratches, pause. I sat up on the couch. The plastic sheet crinkled under me. The scratching stopped. Then very faintly, I heard breathing. Not from Victor's room, from behind that door. I got up. I walked to the hallway. I stood in front of the storage room. The padlock was hanging open. It had been locked when I went to bed. I was sure of it. I had checked, and now it was open. I didn't open the door. Some part of me understood that opening that door would change everything, and that whatever I found I would not be able to unfind. I went back to the couch, and I sat there until morning. When Victor came out, I told him I was leaving. He asked if everything was okay. I said yes. He looked at me for a long time. Then he looked down the hallway at the storage door. The padlock was closed again. He said that's probably best. Not are you sure, or is something wrong? Just that's probably best. Like he knew. I left and took the U-Bahn to a hostel in Mitte, and I stayed there for the rest of my time in Berlin. I reported Victor's profile a week later, not for anything specific. I just said the listing was inaccurate and the space felt unsafe. Couchsurfing sent me a form response. 2 months later, his profile was gone, but not because they removed it. He deleted it himself. I still think about the scratching. 5 and then a pause. 5 and then a pause. It took me a long time to realize why that pattern felt so familiar. It's the number of fingers on a hand. Someone was dragging all 5 fingers down that door, one slow stroke at a time, and the padlock was open. Whoever was doing it could have come out at any time. That story stayed with me long after the first time I read it. The idea that you're sleeping in someone's home and you're not the only guest. This last story is the most disturbing one we received. I almost didn't include it. It's called the host who had already checked me in. A listener sent this from Istanbul. He never requested to stay with this host, but when he checked his messages, there was an entire conversation he didn't write. Someone had used his account to arrange his own arrival, and the host was waiting. I never sent a request to stay with him. When I brought this up, he told me I had. He showed me the messages. They were from my account. They sounded like me. Let me back up. This was in 2022. I was doing a solo trip through Turkey, couchsurfing in Istanbul. I'd arranged a stay with a woman named Aylan in Kadıköy for 3 nights. But when I got off the ferry and checked my messages, there was a new one. It was from a host named Emre and Fatih, on the other side of the city. He said he was looking forward to my arrival that evening and sent an address. I had never contacted this man. I had never seen his profile. But when I checked my sent messages, there was an entire conversation. I had apparently reached out to him 4 days earlier. I told him my travel dates. I told him what time I'd arrive. I told him I was traveling alone and that no one else knew my itinerary. That last part made my hands go cold because I would never write that. I have never written anything like that to anyone. I messaged Aylan and confirmed our arrangement. She responded warmly. I went to her apartment and had a perfectly normal stay, but I couldn't stop thinking about Emre. I kept rereading the messages I'd apparently sent. The writing style was close to mine, but slightly off. A little too detailed, a little too eager. Whoever wrote them was working from a template of how I communicate but missed the small things. On my second night in Istanbul, I decided to look into Emre's profile more carefully. He had 12 reviews. They were all 5 stars. But here's the thing. None of the reviewers had any other activity. No other reviews given. No other trips listed. They were shell accounts. Every single one. I went further. I searched the names. 3 of them matched missing persons reports. 1 in Turkey, 1 in Greece, 1 in Georgia. Young men, solo travelers, last known to be in Istanbul. The reports were from 2019, 2020, and 2021. 1 per year. I sat in Aylan's kitchen at 2 in the morning reading these reports and feeling like I was going to be sick. The next morning, I went to the police. I showed them the messages, the profile, the matching names. They were polite, but I could tell they didn't take it seriously. A foreign tourist with a conspiracy theory about a couchsurfing host. They wrote down the information and told me they'd look into it. I should have left it there, but I didn't. On my last night, I took the ferry to Fatih. I told Aylan I was going out for dinner. I walked to the address Emre had sent. It was in a residential neighborhood near the old aqueduct. Tight streets, high walls, cats everywhere. The building was narrow and old with a green metal door. There was no buzzer, no nameplate. I stood across the street for about 30 minutes. I don't know what I was expecting. The door opened once. A man came out. He was average height, average build, maybe mid-30s. He stood in the doorway and lit a cigarette and looked directly at me. He didn't wave. He didn't call out. He just looked at me the way you'd look at something you'd been expecting. Patient, calm, almost satisfied. I left. I walked back to the ferry terminal as fast as I could without running. That night, I deleted my Couchsurfing account. But before I did, I checked Emre's profile one last time. He had a new review. It was posted that day, timestamped 3 hours earlier. 5 stars. The reviewer's name was mine, not my username, my actual name, first and last. The review said, "Wonderful host, felt right at home, will definitely be back." I did not write that review. I was standing across the street from his building 3 hours earlier. I was never inside, but the review was from my account that I was still logged into, my account that no one else should have had access to. I filed a report with Couchsurfing support. They said they found no evidence of unauthorized access. They said the review appeared to have been submitted from a device associated with my account. I don't know what that means. I only had one device, my phone that was in my pocket the entire time. I left Istanbul the next morning. When I landed back home, I had an email. It was from Emre. It wasn't through Couchsurfing. It was sent to my personal email address, the one I've never linked to any travel platform. It said, "Thank you for staying with me. I hope your flight home was comfortable." There was an attachment, a photo. It was the inside of an apartment, small, dim, a single mattress on the floor. On the mattress was a pillow and a folded blanket, like someone had prepared it for a guest. On the wall above the mattress, there were photographs, dozens of them, young men, solo travelers, some smiling, some not. And on the far right, at the end of the bottom row, there was an empty space, a single pin with nothing attached to it. I understood immediately what that space was for. I've moved twice since then. I changed my email. I changed my phone number. But every few months, I get a message from a new account on some platform. Different name each time. Always the same phrasing. It says, "I still have your spot open. I don't travel alone anymore." If you've ever used Couchsurfing, or any platform that puts you in a stranger's home, just remember, a good review doesn't mean a safe person. It might just mean the last guest didn't make it far enough to leave a bad one. Thanks for watching. Stay safe out there.
And that's where tonight's file closes, but the archives are far from empty. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe and join us as we uncover more horrors, mysteries, and true crimes hidden in the horror archives. Until next time, keep the lights low, keep listening, because you never know what story we'll uncover next.